Hello everybody, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is our Choosing Books for Year 5 webinar. I'm Nikki Gamble, I'm Director at Just Imagine, and I'm joined today by two very special guests who I hold in extremely high esteem, Roy Moss and Erin Hamilton. Roy currently is a libraries advisor. He'll tell you more about that himself and the work that he does across a number of schools. But he also writes blogs for Just Imagine, and if you have a look on the Just Imagine website, justimagine.co.uk, you'll see how wonderful those blogs are. And Erin Hamilton, who I think is a reading advocate in Suffolk, in Ipswich, who also reviews children's books for Just Imagine. So again, look out for her very insightful reviews on justimagine.co.uk. But I've invited them here today in their capacity, in the capacity of their work in schools. And so I'd like to start with Erin, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about what your role involves? A reading advocate sounds like the dream job.
It actually is the dream job. I work for a trust of schools. There's 14 schools. And I just get to go and I talk to staff about books. I run book groups. I build libraries. I stock libraries. And I just talk books all the time. So it really is a dream job.
Amazing. And we'll be talking to you a little bit in a moment about your Year 5 readers in particular. Did you make that job up and create that job for yourself?
Well, to be fair, it has evolved slightly because it started off as a project for the DFE and it's just evolved into what it is now. So hard work and determination have created it into what it is. So.
And do you notice that having a reading advocate like that, well, of course you're going to say yes, but what sort of impact does it have?
Well, I think in the first instance, it just gives an extra staff member to certain schools that maybe are short-staffed and, you know, maybe don't have the expertise in running book groups. So that's where it started. But now it's evolving into sort of helping staff with their own book knowledge for their year groups and sort of their own book groups. So it's a little bit, well, triple fold, really. There's so many aspects to this job that it could be. So lots of impact across the trust.
Wonderful. I can see some connections with what you do and what Roy does. Tell us about your role, Roy.
Well, I am a school librarian across 3 schools in one trust, and I look after all the things to do with the library. I read with a lot of children as well, which is fantastic, and I am also working in the classroom as a teaching assistant as well in Year 5.
Excellent. So you're both incredibly well placed to help me in this exploration this afternoon in terms of how we might go about choosing books for the Year 5 classroom. We're really thinking about not so much books that you use for teaching, not that there's always a very clear line, but we're thinking about reading for pleasure and stocking our classrooms with books that are really going to engage all kinds of readers. And that's the sort of emphasis that we're putting on our session this afternoon. Before we get into the books, I just wanted to create a sort of portrait of what a Year 5 reader might look like. Now, this is a very generalised picture because we know that children are individuals and they're very different. So it's more about trends and the kinds of things that if you speak to a lot of Year 5 readers, as we have done, you know, we did a reading research project with Years 5 to 8, and one of the aspects of that project was to conduct reading surveys and perception surveys, and also to observe children's reading and to talk to their teachers about their reading. So I'm drawing a little bit on that, as well as other reading surveys that have gone before and other research. So in Year 5, we can expect that most of our readers are going to be independent readers. And indeed, that will range right up to those that are compulsive readers, and that reading is actually their preferred hobby, their preferred activity. Sometimes we need to give those readers support, actually, because I think it might have been Roy or Joe that I was talking to a little while ago. Sometimes they want to carry the biggest book that they can find. You know, they think that that's the badge of being a good reader. And so we can't just necessarily leave them to their own devices. There's that, and I'm sure you'll give more of your views and opinions on that in a little while. So some might be that kind of reader. Others may be able to read independently, but they choose not to. And they need nurturing, don't they? Not admonishing or cajoling, because there are all sorts of reasons that a reader who might not choose to read. Sometimes the reading material just isn't appealing enough. Or they may have busy lives and have other kinds of hobbies. And it's easy for us who are so passionate as we are about reading to think that our hobby is the best one. So I think we have to be very subtle in how we deal with that. Or they may have lived experiences that just make it hard to sustain reading for longer periods of time. And I think we have to acknowledge that too. In year 5, the kinds of things we might expect to see are certainly a lot of peer pressure with book choices, carrying around books because friends are reading them, or reading the books that are most visible, that kind of stereotypical reading, because there are certain books that are visible in bookshops, in supermarkets, and so on. Reading identities are really being established at this point, and children will be able to talk about their preferred writers and even their preferred genre, and may select books according to their reading preferences, their genre preferences. Generally, children are reading with confidence, more books that don't necessarily relate to their direct personal experience. So at this time, we might see an increased interest in historical fiction or science fiction, for instance. And then in terms of reading behaviour, increased capacity for making more complex inferences and being able to explain them, built on whatever their previous experiences are. We find children responding more easily at a thematic level, being able to accommodate alternative interpretations and points of view. For those that don't read widely and often, potentially there's a widening gap as we go higher up the primary school. And one of our roles as people who support children's reading is to sensitively approach that in order to provide a reading experience that works for all. And I think particularly at this time, we have to be careful with the discourse around levelling up. And that can be counterproductive. That levelling up language is, for us, it's not language that children need to have access to or feel anxiety about. And for me, the best way of dealing with that is reading aloud, and lots and lots and lots of it. That's very broad brushstrokes into the kinds of things that we might expect in year 5. How does that match up, Roy, with your vision of a year 5 reader?
Yeah, definitely. I think the history, when you said about children's interests and part of that being history, I think that's definitely a key one. When I've been asking children this week about what they're most looking forward to next year, a lot of them have just said World War II and World War I topics. It's definitely up there. And children in year 5, you know, especially the boys as well, they're very social readers. They like to share, they like to pore over the same book, you know, gather around in a group or in pairs and just share knowledge and just talk about things. That's what they really, really like to do. Share their knowledge and their expertise about things. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Erin, how do you feel about the sort of levelling up discourse and how that could impact on readers?
I think we have to be so cautious sort of in schools with labeling and giving them access to sort of teacher language and sort of what we think about their reading. Because when we talk about reading for pleasure, it really just needs to be whatever they want to read. And whether it's a year 5 student who chooses to pick up a picture book or a graphic novel, it needs to be what they're interested in and what they're wanting to read. And the leveling up and things like that is just more for us just to be aware that yes, they want to read those, that's great, but we need to broaden their diet with other things as well, just to make sure that they've, you know, got a little bit more variety at times.
At the end of the day, you can only choose a book from what you know is out there. So our role really is to broaden that experience by showing the possibilities of what's available. Shall we have a look at some books? And I think you've both raised an important point, which is about always starting from children's interests. That's got to be number one up there. But let's have a look at some other things. So maybe this covers it as well. I mean, for me, one of the most important things is reviewing the book collection and making sure that I've genuinely got something in there for all tastes. It's very easy to buy according to your own taste and to dismiss things that you think lie outside that. So I've worked with colleagues in the past who have been, you know, very sensitive about horror fiction, for instance, because they see the real dark side of that. Perhaps they see more darkness in it than the children themselves see, or certain kinds of humour that people are dismissive of because they think it's trivial. So a book for all tastes, definitely. And I've just put some of them up here. I don't know if there are any that you recognise or would like to talk about.
I think The Haunting of Aveline Jones is really good. It's creepy and it's very mysterious as well, and quite sinister in places in a really brilliant way. And there's a lovely secondhand bookshop in it as well, which is brilliant, with books tumbling all over the place. So yeah, and another thing, you know, what we were talking about earlier, Nikki, was that it's a shorter book. It's a good length. It's not got lots and lots of pages. It's about, I think, 200 pages ish. I think it's very sort of manageable. And yeah, no, it's really good one for those short days, long nights. Hedge Witch, I'm 2 chapters into Hedge Witch at the moment, and yeah, I'm enjoying it. It started off quite pacey, which is good. However, that one is one of the thicker books, which again, you know, like you were saying, they will pick up possibly because it's a badge of honor rather than something that they will know they're going to enjoy and get through. Yeah.
Of course, that's not to say that a reader won't enjoy it,
Absolutely.
but it's just us being aware when you look at the bookshelf. Have you got, you know, having some quick reads? We're going to look at quick reads as well in a moment. They're not necessarily a lesser quality because they've got fewer pages in them. I think that's really important, isn't it? Erin, any on there that you, or indeed any other books that cover a range of genre that you would like to recommend?
Well, I've read almost all of those and they're all fantastic, but I just want to call out Jimmy at the River School because that is just the most glorious sort of boarding school style story that is completely different from sort of the ones that we know and love, you know, Murder Most and Ladylike series and things like that. It's just a joyous story to read. That's a great one. And it's not overtly long. I think it's within range of a decent one.
Why is it different? I think maybe people listening would like to know a little bit about why it's different to what we're used to.
So it's a boarding school set in Africa, and the girl that gets to go wants her best friend to go. And when her best friend does sort of arrive, it's in the sort of, she's more of a servant than as an attendee of the boarding school. And there's elements of the boarding school. There's the midnight snacks, there's the sports days, there's, you know, the trips out together. But it's just set in the most gorgeous setting of Africa. And Jimmy herself is just the most amazing character. So funny, so determined, so bright, and determined to change the life for her best friend. Really great story.
And also leads into a theme that we'll cover again in a little while about making sure that all of our collections are inclusive. And we'll have a look at that in a little while. I mean, I would pick out, because I just absolutely adore Phil Earle's writing, While the Storm Rages, which is his second book set during the Blitz. and about animals in jeopardy. If you remember when The Sky Falls was about the animals in the zoo, this one is about pets that are under threat of being destroyed, as they were, you know, at the start of the Blitz. But Noah in this story determines with his friends that he is going to save his dog Win and their pets, and he commandeers a narrowboat with a view sailing to Windsor, where he thinks he will find somebody who will take care of all of their animals. It's a very poignant story. It's fast paced, and Phil is so good at keeping us with that story right to the very end. You know, when sometimes a story ends 3 chapters before the end and it's all about the unraveling and we're winding down. Literally on the last page, you're still not quite knowing how this story is going to turn out. And Shana Jackson's The Good Turn, this adventure story set in Luton, a group of friends who, very different friends who look as though they don't necessarily fit together, doing good deeds, and they discover that a car factory, which is at the back of one of the children's houses, this disused car factory suddenly has lights that appear at night, and they wonder what's going on. And being very brave children, much braver than me, they decide to camp out to keep and have a stakeout to see what's going on. And it has some unexpected turns in there. It's a good adventure story, but it's got a lot of heart, and it really covers some important social and political issues as well. We've got Adam too. I won't go into all the detail, but you know, let's get some good science fiction in there, and as well as the folkloric horror that Roy mentioned with the Aveline Jones, Jennifer Killick's style horror, which is much more related to film, and yes, jump scares galore in that book. So is that we've got sport in there too. Any other you know, for people that are auditing their book collections, what else should they look out for?
I think Utterly Dark is really good. It's the first in a series as well, so that would be one to go for if you're a fan of a series. So that's definitely a good adventure and mystery story as well. So I definitely go for that one. Definitely.
I think Jazz Santos as well is the first in a series. I think there's another one really soon about one of the other characters on that team, which would sort of lead itself to sort of more, if they really like that one, then it's a nice sidestep into the next one.
Either literally just out or just coming. I think you're right. I think it's Charlie. Oh, can't remember the title, but I know it's got an orange cover.
Yeah.
And I suppose while we're talking about sport, making sure that it's not that we're kind of tapping into children's interests, and we find out what sports they're interested in, because it might be football, but it might be cricket, or indeed one school that I was working in where it was everybody was into fishing. Actually, there aren't that many novels about fishing, but we have to be aware of what turns the children on with their interests, not just their reading interests. Shall we move on and have a look at our next? So quick reads and illustrated books. This relates to the point that you've already made, Roy, about the length of things. And I think just about all the books, if not all of the books on this slide, are published by Barrington Stoke, who clearly do such a tremendous job in high quality stories and novellas that are every bit as deep. I mean, it's amazing what can be achieved in so few pages with so few words, but all of these writers do an amazing job. I mean, I want to pick out Steve Cole, World Burned Down, which is now one of 4 books that he's written that deal with different aspects of our world and social justice issues. So the latest one, All Stitched Up, is about the fast fashion industry and the distressing of jeans in sweatshops in China to make jeans with holes in them using acids and sand guns and things that are really dangerous to the children that have to produce them, all for the sake of fashion for us. If that sounds very worthy, I do want to say how good Steve is at making an exciting story out of that, and it is about the children's escape from that factory. So, but it's both well researched and a good story. Any that you've read from, not necessarily the ones that I've put on the screen here, but that you think have worked really well as quick reads?
I know World Burned Down, I've read that with a couple of children, and that has been that was very successful. They loved that. I think because it was fast paced and it was very actiony, a lot of action in it. And they're at an age as well where they could start understanding the issues in it, and actually sympathise that this is actually happening in the world. So without giving too much away, it's set in Brazil in the rainforest, and destruction of the rainforest. So yeah, it's an important issue to a lot of children. Tragedy at Sea is brilliant. It's more of a non-fiction, a short non-fiction. Tells the story of the Titanic, and again, a lot of people better get their teeth into that in a way that they feel like they're reading fiction, but it's actually non-fiction. Yeah, really good.
Erin and I were both at a talk recently where Tom Palmer spoke, and I can see we've got Arctic Star up there. What a writer. I mean, he's really found such a great voice in these shorter novels, hasn't he?
He's amazing. And I think what struck me most about Tom and meeting him and chatting to him is the amount of research he puts in to make sure that every element of his story is as close to fact and real. And I think that just speaks volumes about how invested he is in these books. They're so readable, so enjoyable. And I haven't met a student yet who didn't really get invested in the story.
After the War is a great favourite of mine. And there is a new book coming from Tom later in the year that we did have a sneak preview of. And I think we're all very excited to see that one when it comes out. I think the other thing that this collection does on this slide here is show what a diversity there is again in terms of the types of fiction. And I really think that that's one of the things that Barrington Stoke have done so well. They've taken this away from, the short fiction, the dyslexia-friendly books always used to be a certain kind of book because it was assumed that there was a certain kind of reader that needed them. And what they've done here is really broaden that out and given these books a cover, look and feel that is similar to what these writers would have with their other publishers. So you can have a Steve Cole book or a Jill Lewis book in the classroom, and they feel like they fit with Jill Lewis's other books, which I think is really good.
I really enjoyed Bruno and Frida as well. That is links in with World War II. Bruno is a German boy, and he loses his mother in a bombing raid, and he is escaping across the country from the Russian army with a dog as company, which happened to be in the Russian army as well. So that's a very exciting story as well, and nice to see a World War II book from the other side, from a German child's perspective. So that links in nicely with the history interest as well.
Yeah, Tony Bradman, isn't it, that one? And might be an interesting comparison with the Phil Earle that I was talking about earlier. Let's have a look, see what else I suggested. Oh, yes, let's not leave picture books behind. So I know all three of us are champions of picture books for older readers, and there's no way that this is in any way a lesser kind of read. One of the things that we found in the project I mentioned earlier, where we were working with year 5 to year 8 readers, is that the readers who had been labelled by their teachers as higher attaining readers tended to read very quickly, but not very deeply. It was really interesting to see that. And one of the ways that we encouraged them to just slow down and to take more notice of detail was actually to introduce more picture books into their reading. And it had an amazing effect, actually, as I say, of just getting them to notice detail, to realise it's not just rushing through a book. And these just happen to be some of my favourites for year 5, but you may well have others. Erin, do you know of these? Oh, Roy, yes.
No, sorry, I was going to say Stone for Sasha is wonderful for it's. I mean, obviously it's a wordless, well, a silent book, and that, I mean, that goes very deep, and you could read into that, you know, your own sort of story on top of it, which, yeah, no, it's great. And the end papers are fantastic, which tells the journey that Stone has taken across the world, which is, yeah, it's really a good way of introducing children to the whole form of the book, rather than just what's on the pages. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what the stone is.
The stone
where it comes from.
The stone is a meteorite from space, and it crash lands during the dinosaur time, I think, if I remember correctly, and it's excavated by sort of early humans, I think, gets taken to Babylon, I think, and gets carved into various sort of monoliths and statues, and it gradually gets smaller and smaller and smaller until someone very special finds it for a very special reason. It's really nice, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Erin, are these favourites of yours, or do you have other favourite picture books that you like to read with your year 5s?
So a couple of years ago, I did a year 5 group, and we used Farther, and it has some words in it, but I found that really struck them. They really had to think about looking at some of the images in that book and realizing what had happened. And that for me really struck a chord, because I think you're right in saying they see a picture book, they race through it, but some of these are so detailed and offer so much more visual than, you know, the words could ever do justice. It's that picture speaks 1,000 words. It's so true in some of these books, but that one really struck a chord with the year 5s I was working with at the time.
Some you couldn't be more detailed really than How to Live Forever, the Colin Thompson, which is a classic really, and some have quite a lot of reflective space in them, like The Dam by David Armand and Levi Pinfold. A lot of space for you to, you know, put your own reflections and your thoughts into, and very lyrical text. And I sometimes think, you know, I have a look at book categorizations, and you see something like How to Live Forever being given a 5+ reader tag on it. And it's not to say that a reader of 5+ can't get something out of that, but clearly an older reader is going to get so much more, because it offers itself up to be read in a multiplicity of ways.
What I really like.
Yes.
Sorry, what I was going to say about The Dam is that I liked how it explores the landscape rather than just character. It's all about where they are rather than what they're doing, really, I suppose. All about place. Yeah.
I also like the way that, you know, a simple way of dealing with it would have been this, you know, valley is drowned, how terrible, we've lost, because there is loss here, and that's painful, but actually something new and beautiful comes out of that in this story, and that's perhaps more unexpected, and I really like the way that was dealt with in this story. And of course Varmints is a classic favourite as well. Mark Crast and Helen Ward. Well, I think we all need a good laugh, don't we? And isn't it great to see that humour is being valued more now? I think it has gone through a period where people have felt that humour is trivial somehow, or gatekeepers have felt that it's a little bit trivial and you should be reading something more worthwhile and serious, which of course is hugely erroneous. What makes you laugh, Roy? What makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? That's a really good question. My parents make me laugh. My dad cracks me up. These books, I love Would You Rather, and I can't wait to share this with the children at school. It's just bonkers. It's just a lists and lists of Would You Rather questions, and it's completely irrelevant to anything apart from just making you laugh. It's just and children will love sharing it with other children. They'll love sharing it with adults. They will be asking these questions all over the place. So it's a good alternative to a joke book, which are brilliant, but this would be something different than a joke book, and it's wonderful.
I think every classroom should have a collection of joke books as well, by the
way.
Oh,
absolutely. Definitely.
Really important. I love that one as well. The Would You Rather. That's good. I've got some non-fiction on there. Do you know The Biggest Footprint? So I've put it on there because it is incredibly funny. It's a non-fiction book, and it's really a green issues and a climate book. And you know how serious we can be about those issues. And sometimes a sense of humour can make the point so much more effectively than all the lecturing in the world. Basically, The Biggest Footprint takes the idea of squishing all of the human beings on the planet into one giant human being. How big would that human being be? And then squishing all the other things, like all the wild animals, all the cows. And you can see, and also historically, how things have changed. The size of a human being compared to the size of a squished elephant. Well, not that long ago, squished elephants would have been a much bigger size. But now the squished giant human can actually stand on top of the elephant's back, and it's like as tiny as a little shoe. So it's making some really serious points, but you're sort of laughing as you read it as well. I think it's very clever to be able to do something like that. What makes you laugh, Erin?
So much, to be fair. My kids and my cat make me laugh. I had to mute a moment ago as he came in howling. He was very upset. I left him outside. But looking at these books, I've just started The Underpants of Chaos by Sam Copeland and Jenny Pearson. And my word, I have literally spat out my tea at some points because it's unruly and just chaotic. It's just brilliant. That will really capture some children's imaginations. And I challenge any teacher to read it aloud without giggling. So funny.
This is the first time they've written together. Separately, they're great writers, aren't they? Sam Copeland and Jenny Pearson. I love everything that they've done so far. Put them together, double the fun. I mean, it really is. It's fantastic. And I'm really pleased to see that Anthony Horowitz has returned to the Diamond Brothers, because we all know him for Alex Rider and his television writing like Foyle's War, but he's incredibly funny. And in fact, this book, you might know, Erin, seeing as you're Suffolk-based, the royalties for this book are actually going to a Suffolk-based charity, because he started writing this story in lockdown. It was a free story online for children, and it's been completed and published now with that commitment to supporting family charities. Where Seagulls Dare, it's obviously a play on Where Eagles Dare, the Alistair MacLean film. He's just so good at the pacing of a joke, really, really funny. And I have to say, from a personal point of view, the Diamond Brothers, the older books, are the books that turn my son into a reader. And that is, that's a really special thing, isn't it, when that's the book that does it. So Anthony Horowitz and Steve Cole, thank you both very much. You are the writers that had the biggest impact on my son when he was growing up. Do you know the Helen Rutter book?
I've read The Boy Whose Wishes Came True, and my daughter picked it up, actually. Really charming story, lots of funny moments, but actually very heartwarming and thought-provoking, because the boy is challenged to get wishes, but they have to be very cleverly and clearly worded to get just the right wish. And they're really well received. Really great book.
Because humour isn't just one thing, is it? No. There's a full range of from the slapstick to the verbal humour to the bittersweet. And I think, remembering that and making sure we've got the full range of humorous kinds of text in the classroom as well. I'm so pleased that there's another Little Bad Man coming out in July. I can't wait for that. And I just thought I'd show people a few of the insides of these books. That's your one, Roy.
Yeah.
Is it set out like that all the way through?
Yes. It's every page is different, but yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
This is my biggest footprint. You can see the human being squished into being the giant. The giant's very stupid, by the way. The giant human being is not very bright, it has to be said. And there you are on the thing. I think that's the fingertip. You now see if all the tigers in the world were squished together, or all the giraffes. That's what they would look like.
I think to put that into a visual way, it's very powerful, isn't it?
Absolutely. The cows are huge, and I think the chickens are really big. So there's a lot in here about food production as well. But you're laughing as you're reading it. That doesn't mean you're not taking it seriously as well. This is really just from How to Steal the Mona Lisa. I just want to show the insides, the kind of white space, the multimodality of this text being written as letters, as report files, which of course a lot of children love as well. Well, comics and graphic novels, I think I need to go to Erin first on this, because I know you're passionate about graphic novels.
I am, and I have them here. I went to my bookshelf specifically to choose some that I love. We are in a bit of a movement right now, I think, across sort of children's literature to get more graphic novels into the hands of children, not just those that we may think of as reluctant readers, but those who are advanced readers or those who are just interested. They're so vastly different and they offer so much for everybody in a different way. So yeah, I'm very passionate about graphic novels. I think they should be in every classroom, every year group.
In fact, they're not necessarily the easiest things to read. This idea that they are for children that can't read is, again, they may well work, but that isn't the only reason, as you've said, for having them. Tell us about some of the books you've got in your pile, your favourites.
It was hard to choose a favourite. I've set myself a challenge when we went into lockdown and I couldn't fly home to Canada. I set myself the challenge to read only graphic novels for the summer. And I got so hooked on them that I've ended up spending an absolute fortune on them because they're so fantastic. But Lightfall in particular, this way. And there is the second one, which I haven't read yet. But it's got these elements of Star Wars-esque type scenes and sort of this journey that Bee goes on, and she meets Cad and they're looking for the pig wizard, and it's just so fantastical. But there's so much beautiful imagery just throughout. Some of it's quite dark, so it's got, a bit of that sort of darkness. Some of those children that aim towards more horror and spooky stories, it suits them. And I've also pulled Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. It's a really great way to introduce a classic text, a new format that It is changed slightly. I won't be lying if I say that, and it's no spoiler alert. There are some changes, but it then might prompt them to go back and read the classic, which then introduces them to an amazing story that has survived so many generations. So those are the two that I would say those are just brilliant for year 5 and 6, but year 5 certainly could handle both of those.
Roy, are you a graphic novels fan?
I am. I love them too. And they're hugely popular at the moment in year 5 as well. And across the school, they're completely popular as well, across all schools. Especially, I see a lot of, in year 5 towards the end of the year, a lot of the children are wanting to read books about growing up. And I think, drama and Guts, Roller Girl, those ones are really popular with the girls. And also, When Stars Are Scattered as well by Victoria Jameson is really popular. And I know when a graphic novel is popular because I don't see it for weeks because it's making its way around the class. Narwhal and Jelly books, on the less serious note, are hugely popular with some of the year 6s at the moment. It's they're just flying off the shelves all the time. And I think when a child finds a genre or a type of book they like, they will stick to it and seek out others, I think, rather than sort of having those comfort reads. So I think they're vital at the moment, graphic novels, in any school, in any classroom, any library. Yeah, absolutely.
Narwhal and Jelly is one of those that can work across the age ranges, can't it, really? And again, I just included some internal spreads of some of the graphic novels on the slide there, just to show that, again, there's a really big range. Some of them have a lot of words, and if you were to do the word count on them, you might have 20,000 words in some of these books, and people think they have fewer words. Often that isn't the case, so but they do vary considerably. So here's Yorick and Bones. Is that one you know?
Yeah, it's really good. It's sort of it can introduce younger readers to Shakespeare, which is great. It's got a nice rhythm to the words, iambic pentameter, and it's clever. It's really well done. Yeah, it's nice.
This is Olga. I'm a bit of an Olga. Obviously, Joe Todd Stanton, very different kind, high production. Again, they can range considerably in the production value. Something that is a very glossy finish, or something that is more ephemeral. So it's good to have both. There's Leo and the Gorgon's Curse. I just wanted to make the point that it can be non-fiction as well. This is a day in the life of the Pooh, the Gnu, and something else. Obviously won the Blue Peter award. A lot of reading in that. And that's Percy Jackson, I think, there. So familiar stories finding new formats as well. Gone back to Todd Stanton. So reading for pleasure means non-fiction too, and again, I'm sure all three of us are in agreement with that. I suppose the main point that I wanted to make was that we don't compartmentalise non-fiction as something that just serves the curriculum, that we have to look at our non-fiction collections and ensure that they're broader than that. And again, it comes back to children's interests. And there are books here that would never be used as, supporting a curriculum subject, like the First Names book. Now, I know you read the Dwayne Johnson, didn't you, Roy?
I did, yeah, and I really liked it. I was going in thinking, what's this going to be like? But it was really well done, I thought. And
we've just lost Roy. Oh, he's back.
It was really good. It wasn't just all the amazing things that Dwayne Johnson's done. It was some of the things that he probably regrets in his life as well, and some of the things he did when he was young, which, you know, he's probably learned, you know, a lot of lessons from as well, which was really good. And, you know, I had it sitting, you know, next to me at a table at work, and a year 5 child walked past, said, "Oh, Dwayne Johnson." Like, he was surprised to see him on a book. It was, and he was automatically sort of, his interest was piqued. And that was a couple of months ago, and I haven't seen the book since. So it's yeah, I think it's a good sign, I think. So that, yeah, it was really good, really good.
I love that risk taking, because it's so easy just to, oh, thank goodness, you know, we've got books about Greta Thunberg and we've got books about Nelson Mandela. We need those, but sometimes you see the same names being written about in lots of different series. This is the first one really where I've seen Dwayne Johnson picked up, and it's as though somebody's really listened to what children want to read about, and I think that's so important. Any subjects you'd like to see biographies of, Erin, that are just not appearing? This is our opportunity to shout out to the publishers out there. We need biographies of these characters.
It's hard to know. I mean, you could go down any direction, but I've always been fascinated by authors, and I think it's because I'm a book lover. But you always see sort of biographies about some of the main people that are around, more prolific perhaps. But I just think every author deserves to have a little biography about where they've come from and where their ideas come from and their publishing journey. I find it endlessly fascinating.
Just looking at the other books on the slide here, the Football School series has done incredibly well, and I think that just hits in exactly the right place. It's informative, it's educative, but above all, it hits the children's interest. What have you got there? Football School joke book. It hits on two fronts there, Roy.
Yeah, no, and this is, I wanted to talk about this one because I think it's really good, and it's what I particularly liked about this was that it was very inclusive of female footballers as well. It was, you know, some of the pronouns and the jokes were, you know, what do you call football? Who, you know, she, you know, the referees were women in this as well, and I think that was really, I don't know why it surprised me. Maybe it shouldn't have surprised me, but, you know, it was brilliant. And I think a lot of girls who love football in our schools, you know, a lot of them, you know, play it just as much as the boys. And I think for them to see a joke book like this with those female pronouns, I think is brilliant. So I think the Football School, you know, doing some really good things. I think those books, definitely.
Yeah. And then I put some others on here that I think are just high interest, and, you know, pluck 2 topics out of the ether really, but they both seem to be quite fascinating to children. The idea of the rescuing of the Titanic, this story that's told from the point of view of the Carpathia that did rescue the Titanic, but also you get these 2 time frames, what's happening on the Titanic and what's happening on the Carpathia. I mean, children are interested in disasters like this. Did you just pick that up, Erin?
I did. I've got it here.
Have the children enjoyed it in your experience?
They have, and it's because it shows a different perspective to the tragedy. I think they all know the story, and they know sort of, maybe not the exact time frame of it, but they know the elements that led up to it. But it's nice for them to see that there were people saved, and there was a ship that responded to the SOS, and they had their own story to tell. And I don't think I've ever seen a book tell that story before for children. I think that's really vital for them to see. They weren't just alone out in the middle of the Atlantic. There were ships trying to reach them, and I think that's really important for them to see.
I put on here Rich Knight's book, If I Ran the Country, because I think all children should have access to this, because they'd make a good job of it, I'm sure. It's really good, it's really well structured, and it kind of poses the question, you know, you could run the country, so this is what you need to do, and it takes them through a series of steps that they need to consider. What kind of government do you want to be? You know, do you want to be an absolute monarchy? Do you want to be democracy? You had that one in your hand, Roy. Did you enjoy it?
I did. I really like this, and it teaches you a lot about, you know, the responsibilities that you'd have if you were running the country. So what would you spend your money on? What taxes would you, you know, enforce? You know, what, you know, international relationships with other countries would you have? It goes really does go into, you know, quite good in depth. And it's also, you know, teaches children about making your voice heard and petitions and things like that. And it's set out brilliantly as well. I mean, it's not just text. There's some pictures in there. There's a bit of humor in there, which is fantastic. It's just, it's one that some children will just absolutely, you know, adore. Okay, it's just, you know, there's so much, and it's not just for children. I mean, I learnt loads of stuff in there, and yeah, I was imagining the country I would sort of run as well.
It's completely non-patronising, I think, which I
exactly.
love about it. And it treats children as though they're interested in serious things that have an impact on their lives. Let's just have a look at some of the internal for this. There you are, there's the Titanic. They're all getting ready to board. And then I just had one that showed musicians playing as the Titanic goes down, while the Carpathia are shoveling like mad to try to get there to rescue the people off that ship. Stunning illustration and text from Flora Delaghi, and I think this one is on the Greenaway, isn't it? I think so. I may have got that wrong. This is from the inside of Inside Animals, just because I think, you know, who wouldn't be curious about what it's like inside a snake and where do its organs go? And this has, you know, a number of animals. Look, here's a penguin, that's what its organs look like. That's going to be fascinating, isn't it? And this one is from Football School, just to show you that it's not all text, but there's the pages broken up with illustration too. So rhyme, rhythm and poetry. In your experience, are children interested in poetry or not? Does it need adult intervention? What do you find?
Yes, I think they are interested in poetry. Today, funnily enough, boy was clutching a copy of Lost Spells, actually, close to his chest. And to quote him, he said, "I just love it. You can just get lost in it." And you often hear that being said about fiction and prose. Not so much children say that about poetry. So that really got me, actually. That was really good. And I think wonder here is brilliant. I think that would have the same effect on this child as well. And I think, you know, is poetry inspired by or about natural history, and it's a really good anthology with some new poets, new poems, and some classics as well. It's a really, really interesting, as well as, you know, a beautiful writing collection.
I think it's really important when we read poetry aloud, because if you've not had experience of much poetry in your past, you may not know how to read that. So it's so important, isn't it, that we have lots of opportunities where we read poetry aloud to children. And again, a full range of, you know, we've got some modern poetry here. There's a version of Cats, which I think was inspired to use the kind of theatre aspect of Cats in the illustration. What have you found? What poetry do children enjoy in your experience, Erin?
Well, it's interesting because in one of our schools, we have just created a poetry spine because we realised that there was a real lack of it in children's reading diet. And when we were putting it together, we were spoiled for choice. There's so much out there at the moment, and it's very diverse, it's very inclusive, and it's very sort of a nice merging of classic poems that children may have heard before, but really nice new poems as well thrown in. But I do really like A.F. Harold's The Book of Not Entirely Useful Advice. That has been a massive hit. Just, I think Minnie Gray's illustrations as well really took it to the next level. But it's just hilarious. Some of these poems really clicked with some of the children.
So on to, maybe I won't spend so much time on this, but you know, the question that must underpin our book selection all the time is, are we being inclusive? And I think, you know, going back and looking at collections in classrooms and libraries, just make sure that we are properly inclusive. I've just put some on the slides here. Obviously, Helen Bronte again, the boy who made everyone laugh, the speech impediment in there, but it's a very funny story and has an important message about not laughing at yourself, just to relieve the tension, you know, not putting yourself down. And it's a lesson that the boy learns in this story. This Orton is a story that features virtually all disabled characters. She's a disabled writer and activist herself. Clearly things like Ms. Rana Farouk, Chandra Jackson, Serena Vittel, Zainab Nayan, but also Phil was talking passionately the other day about making sure that children from working backgrounds and poorer backgrounds can see themselves in the story too. And that was really important to him when he was writing While the Storm Rages. I'm sure people are really aware of this because so much work has been done through reflecting reality. But really just here as a reminder that it's one of the most important things for us to consider. And also teachers' treasures. It's not a case of in with the new and out with the old. There are books that stand and test of time. And some of these may well be books that work well as a reading out, so that small children can access them. Some of my favourites on the screen here. What have you enjoyed for reading aloud to children that might be masters of teachers' treasure?
I think the really classic books are fantastic, or the older ones, to say, rather than classics. I think going back to the graphic novels, the Tom's Midnight Garden graphic novel is that great mix of, you know, the graphic novel and the older style, and the newer style with the older narrative. And it's a great way to introduce children to those older stories, which is fantastic. Yeah.
I want to put a lean of fairy tales, even with the upper end of key stage 2, because so many of them speak more to older children than they do younger children, particularly if you've got a really good Grimm's collection, or the Pullman collection of Grimm stories, or Jamila Gagan's Black and Blue, for instance. But yes, maybe lots, and also you can read a short tale over just 1 or 2 readings. A plus as well. Erin, what do you most like reading? What's your teacher's treasure? Read aloud to us or group?
What I find a lot is Holes and Varjak Pa, which I think probably, I mean, they're not ancient books, but I do feel like they cross into that treasure that teachers hold on to, and they are both magnificent stories. I must admit, I've seen the movie Holes. My son loves it. It's one of his favorites, but I've never sat down and read it through. So I feel like I'm at a disadvantage with these treasures. I think I must catch up and make sure that I'm as well read as some of the teachers I work with.
I really recommend that, along with, I suppose it gives me a similar feel would be Frank Cockrell Boyd's Millions. There's something so unique about the voices of both of those writers. So really, we've had 59 minutes and 51 seconds, that's just about an hour spot on to explore some of the things around some of the ideas around choosing books for the Year 5 classroom. Any parting thoughts, anything that we've forgotten that we really want to pass on to listeners?
I don't think so. Just, there's so many amazing books out there. Check out the bookshop on Just Imagine, because there's just title after title with just quality books. They're just brilliant.
Yeah, you're very good at doing that. I didn't actually tell people. There you are. Bestbookschools.com is our website, and it's not just the schools, by the way. Anybody can use that. Or they may want to check out justimagine.co.uk, where they'll read Erin and Roy, they'll be able to read your reviews, and also Roy, your blogs that you've written for us. Can I just thank you both for taking the time today to join me for this exploration, and also to anybody that joined us in the live stream today. It's been great fun, and we should do it again in a year's time with the new books that have come out. Thanks both so much.
Thank you.